What is up, everybody? This is Wakeman. I am here with Dan. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing well.
All right. We are here to rank some teams. Dan and I both um, individually came up with our own rankings for the Gyarados division, and we averaged the placements, and that's how we got these rankings. So you'll notice a couple of ties, but unfortunately, with dividing by two, that's just kind of unavoidable. So Dan is going to start us off with this first one. You want to take this one first, Dan?
Absolutely. So the team we have ranked 14th is Ollie's team. I just want to reiterate before I really get into it. This doesn't mean this is how we think you're going to finish during the season. This
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have a reflection of what we think about you as a coach. This is just a ranking of how well we think the teams would perform against one another if they were all coached by people that were on the same level. Uh, but yeah, looking at Ollie's team, it's pretty interesting. Like there are definitely some strong tools. The Thunderous, Basculegion, and Paldean Tauros all stand out to me as really, really powerful Pokemon that can do a lot of things. Thunderous has been a little underwhelming for me in draft generally, but I understand what it does and why it can be powerful. But looking at Ollie's team, I am just worried about the damage output overall. Like I said, Thunderous's damage is a bit underwhelming. Basculegion F is going to have less damage than Basculegion M, unless you go with the special set, but I think the physical set is better. Tinkaton's attack stat is awful, even with Gigaton Hammer. Serena's fine. It's just a decent grass type. There's nothing stand out about it. And overall, that's sort of how I feel about this team. It's a lot of bulky pieces that'll work well together to bulk out someone, but I don't really see what the week to week through line with the game plan is. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree with what a lot of you, with a lot of what you said. Like the speed control is good. Tinkaton is arguably one of the most consistent fake out users. It's not the fastest, but just being able to fake out through, different abilities like Bruxish and Farigiraf and Serena, which is on this team. But being able to fake out in front of those things is so powerful. And so, like, there are kind of like a lot of the conventions of draft teams you see, I think, are here. I'm also concerned about the damage output a little bit. Like you said, I have been running a lot of calcs with Basculegion male because I have it in PDCL right now. And it's very, very, very strong, needless to say. But I do feel like the female would miss out on a lot of those calcs because it's 20 points weaker, which that's like a lot. Especially when adaptability is doubling, you're kind of losing a lot more than just base 20 effectively
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it that way. But yeah, I also just don't understand like some of the typings here. Like I don't know why there has to be three water types and three steel types. Like they all do different enough stuff, so it's probably not the worst thing. But I don't know, like two fairy steels. I just feel like you have a lot of overlap that maybe you don't have to have. Like I know there were other prankster users in the same tier as Klefki. I mean, this one is the only one that gets Trick Room, so that might be part of it because Delphox isn't going to be the best Trick Room setter. But also, I don't know what you're setting Trick Room for here, like Muck. I
Yeah, I think the Trick Room mode's a bit questionable, and also Thunderous is a really good prankster user, and then you've got Klefki as a prankster
right.
user. And like you said, there's a lot of I feel like redundancy for a lot of
Hmm.
pieces. So this feels like a draft team that's 8 or 9 picks in and has two more picks to really round it out. But this is a full team currently.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean that's about all I have to say. Do you have anything else to add with this one, Dan?
Nope, I think we just about covered it.
Awesome. Well, we will move to number 13. This is Womble's team. So this team is really interesting to me. I think that in general, there's like Enamorous and Tinglu. Like obviously, there's very strong pieces here. What I start to where I start to kind of be a little hesitant about it is like the defensive synergy here is kind of weird to me. Like you have a lot of fairy weakness. I mean, I guess it's only two things, so or three things, but you don't have great switch-ins to fairy. Um, Never mind. I ignore me. There's literally an Arcanine right there. You don't have great ways to hit Fairy, and I'll stand by that one. But um, I just think that like the speed tiers are fine, but your speed control is a little suspect. Like Grumpig being your Trick Room setter is not the best. You have Tailwind and Enamorus, and it's 106 speed. It's fine. I'm kind of questioning how often you're going to be able to slot Tailwind onto that thing. Obviously, we don't know because it hasn't really been explored much in draft yet. So, I mean, that might be something that Womble has to figure out too. Um, I just think that there's a lot of. Yeah, I mean, this doesn't have the same problem as the last one where I don't think there's a lot of redundancy, but the major thing to me is the speed control, and I'm also, again, not super convinced on the damage output. Um, like your attacking stats, like Enamorus is obviously really strong, and
Mhm.
Tinglu is also strong, but you also really want to. I feel like you usually are wanting to invest a lot of bulk into that, and I think on this team in particular, you're probably gonna want that to be a really bulky kind of piece because a lot of your stuff like Decidueye, Jolteon, and Enamorus, Samurott are not the bulkiest. But yeah, those are kind of my main things with this team. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, the speed control makes me a little bit nervous. Like Braviary is very good, but it's not going to be the most consistent tailwind setter. But looking at the offensive stats, Enamorus and Braviary are the best offensive pieces on this team in terms of like just raw output. Maybe with sharpness, you can consider Samurott in there, but that's three Pokemon that are all weak to electric attacks. Two of them are weak to ice attacks as well and rock attacks. Like I think the threat diversity on this team is a bit lower compared to some other teams. Like the threats are there, don't get me wrong, but the same Pokemon can shut down a lot of the offenses against this team. Like a good rock ground type is just threatening so much of this team, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very scary. So for me, that's why I had this team a little bit on the low end when I was rating it. I do think it's powerful. I like the speed tiers. I don't like the speed control as much, and the threat diversity is something that makes me a little nervous looking at it.
Yeah, I agree for sure. Um, I do like I do really like Enamorus here. In terms of like just being a really strong special attacker, but also like being intimidate deterrent, sort of with contrary. I feel like a couple things here kind of like that, and Braviary is as well. But
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not like
Enamorus is the best thing on this team, and it's
agreed.
not close.
I
Like
mean,
it ties
Tinglu,
everything together.
yeah,
No, it's not close. Enamorus
yeah,
works so much better with the rest of this team than Tinglu does as a tier one. And
yeah,
I don't know if Tinglu is something different, if I'd feel better about this team, but like the Enamorus Arcanine Jolteon, I think is actually pretty solid. But what makes me nervous is that the backup to that is going to be the Samurott and the Braviary, and then you start stacking up these electric type weaknesses and other weaknesses, which makes me a bit more nervous.
yeah. I mean, it does have Tinglu to handle that electric weakness, but again, it's like I feel like Tinglu requires to be like a potent offensive threat. It kind of wants Trick Room to be up, and your Trick Room setter is Grumpig, which is obviously not great. Um, so yeah, overall, I think the defensive synergy is just kind of off-putting to me, as well as
Yeah.
like you said, the speed control. I'm good with this one if you are, Dan.
Yeah, I'll just say the best Ting set on this team is going to be like Rest, Sleep Talk,
Oh no.
Sand Tomb, and either Fissure or Ruination. Like that's the way you got to play Ting on this team.
I mean, trapping something in on like a setup Enamorus or like something like
Yeah,
that, that could be really strong, yeah. Or even Samurott or Jolteon, like, yeah, that does seem pretty good.
yeah.
I also didn't comment on this, but I do actually really like Tinkatuff. In general, like I think it's pretty good on this team. Just in terms of like, I mean, obviously it's only fake out user and all that, but having that, I mean, it's just as consistent as Tinkaton as a fake out user, just a little bit slower. But yeah, I didn't comment on that before.
Yeah, and I will say like this team being team 13 in this division, I think speaks to the power level that was drafted in this division
Yeah,
compared to the other two. Like this team would easily be the top half of the other two divisions, I think.
yeah, it's really strong for sure. just comparably, yeah, it's not quite as insane. Well, that being said, we are going to move on to number. Why did just open my dictionary? I guess.
All right, so number 12, we've got we've got Ed's team. While Wakeman is looking up the meaning of the words that I'm saying, I'll talk a little bit about Ed's team. I have no idea if it's up on his
It
screen or
is
not, or
up
if it's being
now.
recorded. Perfect. So Ed has a solid rain mode with the Palafin Pelipper. It's VGC staple. And it's backed up with Persian, Zoroark, Ampharos, Sandaconda, Crocodile, Ceruledge, Iron Leaves, Passimian, and Articuno. So let's start with the obvious. This team knows what it wants to do, and it's put Palafin under rain basically as consistently as possible. Which means Sandaconda loses a little bit of value as like alternative weather because you almost will never want Sand Up with this team. So you're going to be going with like Shedskin Sandaconda or something. The support pieces next to the Palafin are overall decent. The Zoroark can let you play some mind games with your opponent. Ceruledge is a good deterrent to grass type attacks and to Will-O-Wisps because you can switch in on it. And Iron Leaves actually forms a pretty decent type core with it. Overall, it's a solid team. It's very physically tilted, I think, because if you look at it, you've got the Palafin, the Iron Leaves, the Ceruledge, the Passimian, and the Sandaconda that are all going to be more physical attackers. Zoroark will generally be a special attacker, but it can also be physical. But outside of that, for special attackers, I guess you got Ampharos, and I don't really trust that. And that's really the only main special attacker outside of the Zoroark. So I am a bit worried that it seems a little bit soft to Wisp and Intimidate, but again, there is some deterrence to that with the Passimian and the Ceruledge. But that's just something that makes me a bit nervous about this team. And also, if someone can fight you with weather control and really neuter the Palafin, this team's going to struggle to close out games because the speed tiers and the speed control, which I think is going to be a consistent line with some of these lower tier teams, is going to be struggling with this team compared to some others.
Yeah, I was also gonna comment first on the speed control. Like, you don't have trick room. Like your trick room, does Iron Leaves get trick room? It probably does, but like other than that, Pelipper and Articuno are your Tailwind setters, both of which have not the best defensive typings. Like Articuno's got good bulk, and Pelipper has good physical bulk, but like in terms of their typing, they both have pretty common and easy to tack 4x weaknesses, and their speed tiers aren't very good. So again, and you don't even have like a rain, like a Swift Swimmer here. So sometimes on these rain teams, it's like, well, Pelipper might be an okay Tailwind setter because you have that initial pressure of a doubled speed water type under rain, but you don't even have that here. Your priority is good, like, Persian is a great fake out user, but then on top of that, obviously Palafin and Ceruledge with Shadow Sneak. I think that's good. I like that there's Intimidate Deterrent here, even if I do think Passimian is kind of trash. It is undeniably strong, and you don't want to give this thing +1. But yeah, overall, I also just wonder about it feels frail in a weird way. I'm trying to put my finger on
The move
what it
Rock
is.
Slide exists.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say Rock Slide, but also like your bulky stuff, which is like Sandaconda, and I'm not including Palafin here because obviously Palafin is broken, right? But like if you look at your bulky stuff, Sandaconda, which is usually going to be pretty bulky, Ceruledge, which in my experience can be run very bulky, can be run more of a fast offensive. I think the lack of great tailwind here means you're probably going to be running this more as a bulky like AV / bulk up type of set more often than not. And the Iron Leaves is fine. Like you said, I think the Firewater Grass core is pretty solid. I wish one of them was special, maybe. Um, but yeah, that's my general thought. Like I think the team has good damage output, especially on the physical side. Like you said, I wish there was more special presence, but that's about it for this one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to number 11, we have Blaze Kick's team. So this team is very like it's transparent, right? Like you want to get Sun Up, and you want to be clicking moves with Walking Wake and Sandy Shocks and Torkoal and Lilligant. Like, you have 4 Pokemon, I guess kind of 5 if you count Skiploom having Chlorophyll and base 80 speed. I mean, 80 speed under Chlorophyll spamming Sleep Powder is a real thing. Even though you have Lilligant, which probably just does it better. But um, I think that, the counterplay to this team is change weather, obviously, and so I feel like the issue I have, and obviously the damage output when sun is up is fantastic, and Walking Wake and Sandy Shocks are both not completely reliant on sun. Um, they can be run outside of sun. Their base stats are good enough that they'll be okay. But where my main issue comes in is I think there's probably a little bit of an over reliance on Sun here. Like I think in matchups where Torkoal is pressured really hard by like a strong rock or ground type, which in general ground is pretty good into this team. Um, I think you're gonna find it hard because you don't have like a additional like prankster Sun user or something, which I really like on these kind of teams. And so I'm just a little worried that like if you're not able to get sun up comfortably, or if your opponent has good ways to keep resetting weather on you, then you might struggle um, to like have the damage output that this team could have when like at its peak, because that damage output is ridiculous at its peak. So that's kind of generally my thoughts. I think that there's also like the Trick Room mode here. I don't really get it. Like, there's I mean, obviously Torkoal, right? Like, Torkoal doesn't need. Like, Torkoal under Trick Room is great, but I just don't know, like, Oranguru. I mean, obviously you can instruct, so I'm kind of talking myself out of the point I was just starting to make. But I'm still just like Muckalola. It's good, but you kind of only want to set Trick Room for Torkoal here, which again is strong, but like you have After You for it too. I'm just not sure about its place on this comp. What do you think, Dan?
So a couple things about this team. Like obviously it's very synergistic, and when it's going to be clicking on all cylinders, it's just going to like 8-0 some people. Like that's pretty obvious with it. But I think there are a couple weaknesses with it. It's very specially offensive. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Lilligant and the Berserker, maybe the Muck, are the main physical attackers, and those don't strike fear into people. So Snarl looks really good into it. If weather gets countered and the synergy falls apart a little bit, right? Then I think there's something that's really interesting to look at. The 3 teams before this had an average base stat total of they were all in the 490s. This one is 446, which means you are giving up 50 points of stats on your Pokemon each Pokemon on average versus the teams below it, and that's what you get with synergy. But if the synergistic sun is taken away, then you're just 50 stat points per Pokemon weaker than a lot of these other teams, which is what makes me a bit nervous about this team. Like, yes, you see what it's doing, you see why it works and what it's going to do, and it's going to be very powerful in doing that. But if you counter that and you just make him trade, like Pokemon to Pokemon as opposed to strategy to strategy, those trades aren't going to be in this team's favor because there's just not as many stats overall on this team.
Yeah, I agree for sure. Yeah, the special split here is not great, and I I'm really interested to see how Lilligant Hisui does here.
Oh, I think that Pokemon's busted. Like that's going to
Oh
be the best
yeah,
thing on this
yeah.
team.
I I agree. It's going to be very strong. I've more so said that from a standpoint of I'm not sure if that Mon carrying your physical offensive output. I'm not sure if I trust that enough to carry the whole team, right? Because obviously Berserker is strong, Muck is strong enough, right? But Lilligant is kind of the main like physical thing that you're probably going to be bringing every week, and so I'm interested. I'm not necessarily skeptical, but I am interested to see if Lilligant can carry that physical output side enough on its own. Well, I
Yeah,
think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense with that team for me.
Yeah, and the other thing I was gonna say too is I wish On weather modes, on teams with prominent weather modes, I kind of like to see a tailwind setter, and your tailwind setter here is Skiploom, which doesn't feel like the most consistent thing to me. I guess if you get it up with Sun, but a Torkoal Skiploom lead feels so bad when you could just lead Torkoal Lilligant. I guess that's the last thing I wanted to say about this is because I feel like against teams with weather sweepers, the very common thing if you can't change the weather is to just set tailwind so you can just
Mm.
be faster. And so I've always found when I've had weather teams, at least, and obviously this is partially anecdotal, I've always really liked to have tailwind, like a strong tailwind setter, because it helps you match tailwind, which is such a natural counterplay to these kind of weather teams.
I
Uh,
can agree with that.
all right, we're gonna move on to number 10. This is Tay, the breezy one. Want to go ahead on this one?
Yeah, this team is bizarre. Like, did we tell Tay he was allowed to draft fully evolved Pokemon?
I'm not sure if you got the memo.
Like there are 6 NFEs on this team, which is more than half of the team, which I don't know if I've ever seen before. But it also has Iron Bundle and Flutterman, which means this team is the fastest team in the format, and Fletchinder, which is just Priority Tailwind. So it's the fastest team in the format by a lot, while also having Amoonguss and Gothita on it. Like, I don't. I'll be honest, I don't fully understand this team. Like, yes, you can Flutter Mane, you can just run out a team of Iron Bundle, Flutter Mane, Great Tusk, and Amoonguss, and that can be a 4 that you send out, and that's probably the strongest 4 in the league. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of argument against that.
Yeah, for
But the
sure.
depth on this team is really suspect. I mean, we do know that Choice Specs Ryalu can one-shot a Hisuian Avalugg with Vacuum Wave, but I don't know what the Frogadier is going to do. The Gothita, I know what it can do, but I don't really see how it fits on what this team wants to do. Bisharp to scare away some intimidates, I guess, but like there's just so many pieces on this team that I don't really see contributing. Like the top end of this team is probably the best in the league, but the bottom end is just so suspect. And I'm not. This team, it's either great or awful, and I don't think there's middle ground, and I don't really know how to evaluate it. Just with everything that's going on with it. What do you think?
Yeah, I echo. I'm just gonna echo a lot of what your kind of your sentiments were here. I just think that like, okay, you look at this, right? You have 11 Pokemon, 6 are NFEs. I could say you could probably not count Bisharp.
Yeah.
If and I think Fletchinder is a very solid Pokemon, but that's to me where it stops. Like I had Riolu for like 8 weeks of last GLDL season, and I could never ever find an excuse to bring it, like ever. I would like, oh, I can quick guard stuff. I can set Sunny Day or Howl for my Great Tusk, and then it kind of just never came because everything else was better. And I mean, maybe that's why I lost so much. Maybe I needed to bring Riolu more. But yeah, I mean, again, that's the main issue to me is like Arctobax is like, I mean, it exists. It's
When we say let's go back, Steam, this is not what we mean.
right. Yeah, this is not it. Yeah, I don't know. It feels to me like there were NFEs drafted that were like, oh, these are good NFEs that like do something semi unique on this team, maybe. I don't even know if some of them do that, but like Gothita, right? That's a perfect example to me. Like, yes, it traps. Yes, it fake out. It clicks fake out. Although it's your only fake out user here, which is not the best. I mean, I think since last gen, I was a big proponent of like teams without fake out instantly move down like at least 4 or 5 spots because not having fake out is just such a huge um, like layer of pressure to have, and not having that, I think it kind of sucks. I think this gen it's a little bit more forgiving because like there's a lot, in my opinion. I guess Dynamax was a pretty good counterplay to fake out, but
Yeah, what's wild is Fake Out is better this gen.
Yeah, I know it's weird because I think the major thing with fake out to me is like covert cloak and Terra Ghost and that kind of stuff. It's a little bit less committal than a Dynamax was probably, um, but all that to say, I think Gothita being your only fake out is not super ideal. Um, and then yeah, like I don't know what the Arctibax is doing here. I don't know what the Frogadier is doing here. Um, yeah, it just I like the top end again. Like you're probably bringing Flutter, Amoonguss, Bundle, Tusk, Bisharp, Fletchender. Probably most of your weeks, maybe you're switching Bisharp or Fletch out for like Espeon or maybe Gothita, but like that's kind of all I see here. So it's really strong. It's just I feel like prepping for this is not gonna be all that hard because there's almost half the team you can kind of just I don't want to say ignore, but you don't have to consider as much as the others.
Yeah, and it's weird to say the team with the Moongus is Trick Room soft, but the team with the Moongus is just a little Trick Room soft.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say because like the top end, you've got good speed tiers, and then you've got a Moongus at the bottom, and then everything between a Moongus and like your really fast stuff is like Gothita, Riolu, Arctibax, and then Bisharp, which is can sucker punch no matter what the speed control is, and like stuff like that. But yeah, I agree. I think if someone brings in a Trick Room Grass type against this team, or a Terra Grass, or a Trick Room
Safety
something
goggles.
with goggles, it's gonna be relatively easy to just ignore the Amoonguss and just click moves into
Yeah.
everything else.
Whoever has a Namorous Therian has a very good matchup into this team.
That is very true. All right. That being said, we will move on.
To
Did
our
I?
first tie.
Yes, sir. Did I start the last one or did you?
No, you're up.
Okay, cool. That's what I thought. So this is Jade the Magikarp's team. This was a two-way tie for number 8 here. So I think this team has a very, 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 very strong potential, right? Like the amount of damage you can do on this team by sending out Dragonite and sending in sorry, I got that backwards. Sending out Chien-Pao and then sending in Dragonite or Azumarill or Lucario. Like the damage output you can get there is fantastic. I'm beyond that, it's just like I don't really like there's not it's just weird because you have good physical mons and then I look at the special mons and it's Iron Moth and pretty much nothing else. Like Swalot, I will be the first to admit I don't really know what it does. I assume it's not much of anything. Correct me if I'm
You are
wrong
correct.
there.
No,
Okay, yeah.
no, that's fine.
Yeah. And Electros without a Disquake partner is like I feel like that is the reason it gets drafted most of the time. It's not that that's the only thing it can do. And I guess, Dragonite can Terra Ground EQ. But I just think that I've been kind of thinking, and I've been using Chien-Pao in PDCL. I think Chien-Pao is, in a way, kind of Intimidate deterrent in the sense that, like, if your stuff is strong enough next to Chien-Pao, you can just not care if you get intimidated sometimes. And so I like that it has Chien-Pao to support all of these physical attackers. I'm not like I like that there's two E-Speed users here, although one of them is just significantly worse than the other in like almost every way at clicking E-Speed. So I'm not sure how much Lucario is actually going to be doing that and maybe doing other things. And I guess that Mon can also be run special. It just stands out to me when it's on a comp with Chien-Pao as like I want to click extreme speed. Um, but yeah, overall too, like I think there's a pretty significant rock weakness here. Dragonite, Iron Moth, Vivillon, Chien-Pao are all weak to it. And it's also, again, this is another team that's pretty Trick Room soft, and again, the speed control here is not super fantastic. You're kind of relying on Vivillon or Dragonite for Tailwind, and I'm scanning Girafarig, your Trick Room setter, which is fine, but it doesn't really do a whole lot outside of Trick Room, or like outside of clicking Trick Room. So that's kind of my main thing. I just think that like your priority is great, But like, what does this team do when you run into like a quick guard user or a psychic terrain team or a team with Serena or Bruxis or Farigiraf? And not every team has that, right? But that's my
Mhm.
kind of my concern is like there's a lot of counterplay to priority that I think really neuters this team in general. What are your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, this team's interesting. Like, obviously, the top end again is there, and I think Vivillon is one of the most underrated support pieces. Like,
Agreed.
it works very well with this team outside of Rockslide, but I don't know. Again, this is a team where I don't see the low tiers contributing as much, and Genpao gives it decent speed tiers, but the speed control is a bit suspect to me. Like, Dragonite can set Tailwind, but is that really what you want the Dragonite doing on this team? I mean, it sort of has to, I guess. Vivillon gets Tailwind too, I guess. I think so.
It does, yeah.
Like, there's definitely a lot of solid things on this team, and I think this is a good team overall. But it just strikes me as a little defensively lacking. You're gonna have some trouble switching in if you don't have, and if you're not moving first with this team, either with priority or with speed, this team is just pretty frail. Like the average HP defense and special defense of this team are all under 80. Like it's not going to eat a lot of hits, and that just makes me a bit nervous about it because I don't think the defensive typing works well together. Like Friend Guard can do a lot, but that Vivillon's gonna be putting in work. That's gonna be the best Pokemon on this team, and it's gonna be
Agreed.
if every game this team wins, maybe not every game, but so many of them are going to be because Vivillon gives just enough extra bulk to something else that it can survive and kill something. But the consistency of that's going to make this a bit trickier as well. So it's a good team, don't get me wrong, but I am just nervous about how frail it looks on paper. Like the Azumarill and the Dragonite are really the only things that I see consistently eating hits, and the Swalot, but we'll see what Swalot does.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the frailty is pretty rough, and yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered everything I would say about this. Are you good with this one?
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's move on to our other tie for eighth. This is Flames team.
Okay, this team is pretty cool, and it has a lot of stats on it, which is obviously something that I like. But Landorus Hydreigon is just okay. Let's start with what I think is really good on it. Landorus Hydreigon, Rotom Typhlosion, like Greninja, Slowbro. There's so many awesome special attackers on this team with decent speed control options, a completely different way to play the game in Garganacl if it needs to. Like it can have a win condition that other teams just don't have access to. And Doxbun can do some kind of neat stuff with the Typhlosion as well, I believe. But that sort of leads me into one of the issues that I have with this team is that Landorus is really the only physical attacker on it. I guess Landorus and Hydreigon can both technically be the physical attackers on it, but they're both of them has better special sets than physical sets. So this team, just like the move Snarl, makes me so nervous about this team. But otherwise, like there's a lot of offensive potential. There's decent speed control. I wouldn't say the best. And the damage output, this team probably threatens some of the highest damage output in the league, but it's just all special, which makes me very, very nervous about it because of just how common Snarl is as a move. But what do you think?
I think that you are sleeping on Metatite. No, but no, I generally agree. I think that
It has 40 attack.
listen, man, it has
Huge.
pure power,
Yeah, I guess
and Azu is 50,
no. No.
so it's
Still
it's
no.
not that much weaker. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. No, but
Considerably weaker.
it's definitely not as good. But I think it actually probably is the second strongest physical attacker on this team, probably.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
Yeah.
Garganical might be stronger. Um, but yeah, in general, like there's a couple things that can be run mixed here: Lando, Greninja, Slowbro, but like they're generally just the physical sets are just not as good. Um, especially when you don't really have a way to like set up a Sand Force kind of thing with Lando either. I also don't think this team. I don't know what I think about the Trick Room mode here because obviously Garganical is great under Trick Room. It's pretty good outside of Trick Room. Like if you can just get it in position and with a good defensive terror, like you don't really need Trick Room for it. Um, Having
Yeah.
the option is nice because then it means you can maybe run, more of like an offensive Garg set instead of like the traditional, lefties iron defense type of set. But I do think this is another one where the speed control is a little bit suspect. Um, like your Trick Room setter is good. I like Slowbro Galler as a Trick Room setter. Um, its typing is not, it has a lot of common weaknesses and it doesn't have Oblivious, so I wouldn't say it's probably as good as the other one, but in general, like it's fine. It's stat wise, it's good. Oh, actually, oh right, because this is the one where they move stats into offenses. 95, 95, 70 is not that great for a Trick Room setter with no ability. Regardless, it's fine, right? Like it does the job. But like you're setting Trick Room for Palisand, which I to this day have never seen do a single thing this gen. Um,
Hey, Water Shuriken, Greninja. It could happen.
I you're not wrong.
It
You're
could
right.
happen.
It could. You also have to just hope. Can you run loaded dice with Water Shuriken?
Probably, yeah.
I would assume so. Yeah. So guarantee you get 4 procs.
Well, you only want 3.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Um, but yeah, in general, I'm pretty much in agreement with you on this. I think that the special attackers are super strong here, but just running like a fast snarl user into this team I think threatens it a lot. Also, taunt into this team in general, like taunting Garg, taunting Doxbun, um, taunting Slowbro. Like I think taunt looks pretty good. I mean, that's not necessarily a weakness because you can put mental herb on stuff and all that, but there's a couple mons that kind of just get just destroyed by getting taunted. So I just kind of thought that was worth noting too. You got anything else for this one, Dan?
Nope. I think we covered everything on this team.
Awesome. Moving on to number 7, and this is Tay's team, not Tay Breezy this time. Um, so this team will stand out to me forever as the team that and Tay specifically will stand out to me as the guy who could have taken Dozogiri in the last 2 rounds of the draft and then didn't, and I respect him for that so much. Um, However, despite that, I think this team is very cool. I think that it's kind of weird. It's kind of unconventional, right? I like the Slowpoke pick is cool, and I know he's used it before. I mean, we're not considering that, right? But he has used it before, I know. But like, it's to me the main issue is the speed tiers. I don't know, because Noivern is great. Like I think Noivern is very good, and I think Sableye being able to quash stuff helps a lot with, your speed tiers being maybe a little bit questionable. But beyond Noivern, it's like your speed tiers are really suspect, and it's like I don't know if you're gonna be able to keep up with teams that have like something faster than Noivern, because there's actually quite a few of things that exist now that are faster than Noivern. And in general, just I'm worried that you're going to get outpaced by a lot of those teams. But conversely, right, there is a lot of stuff here like Toadscruel's a pretty good redirector. Sableye obviously has Quash. So you definitely have like ways to mitigate that, but I do think that could be a potential kind of pain point for this team. I really like the priority from this team. Like, obviously, King Gambit is almost just enough priority for any team on its own. But having Zangoose quick attacks are super strong. Urshifu has Aqua Jet, but it's definitely not too reliant on the priority. Like, the Dragonite Chenpao team was. I felt like. What do you think, Dan?
Urshifu and King Gambit work really well together as a sort of offensive core, and even though they're both physical and burn weak, they do intimidate pretty effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think this team is a bit on the frail side, so Sableye with the screens is going to be putting in a lot of work to try and keep a lot of this team alive. I don't see a great way for the Belly Bolt proc initially, which means that I'm not 100% sure how I feel about this Belly Bolt as the electric type on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a Trick Room attacker, and it can be decent in that role. I mean, I think overall, all you can say about it is that it's a very solid team with a lot of solid pieces that do solid things, which for Tay's style is it's gonna fit him as a player very well. Yeah, I don't really have too much to add about it. Like, there's not a lot of obvious weaknesses, but outside of the Urshifu King Gambit, there's not a lot that makes me like jump out of my seat and say like, "Hey, this is going to be super threatening for this team."
Yeah, I agree. I think generally speaking, there's like the synergy. There's not a ton of like crazy synergies here. Like we saw on other teams, we had like Torkoal Walking Away, Lilligant, Sandy Shocks on a team. We had you know Shenpao Dragonite, Lucario, Azu on a team. Like some of the teams in this division have very very strong synergies. I don't know if this team has that as much. But in general, like you said, like it's just a bunch of good stuff, and I think it'll probably work really well. We also didn't really talk about Typhlosion. I think Typhlosion Hisui is pretty cool, just kind of as a, you know, click Tailwind and click Eruption type of mon. Having two Frisk users is kind of cool. But yeah, I mean that's about all I have to say about this one. You good with this one, Dan?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
All right, number 6, Dina, not Donna, or as I called her in season 2 PRs, Dinah. You want to take this one, Dan?
Yeah, well, I'm glad we finally understand how to pronounce Dina's name. But moving on, so this team has the best Trick Room mode in the league, potentially, probably. I mean, Indeedee Armarouge is very consistent. You've got the Expanding Force. And then this is the Enamorasterian team, which is just going to steamroll some things under Trick Room. Like, I think Enamorasterian is very cool, and I'm very excited to see the sets that are on with it. I've theory crafted, like, Calm Mind Draining Kiss on it. Like, there's just so many things you can do with it. But looking beyond that, it's also got a Tailwind option with Tornadus T, which is pretty strong, and Glade, which with Sharpness hits very hard. And Armarouge, I guess, can operate under that mode as well. Mobostiff and Low Kicks are also both decently effective there. There are some things I have some questions about. Like, I don't really think the Drifloon is ever going to be better than the Tornadus, even with Unburden. Like, yes, it can theoretically be faster, but it's going to be hard to see the set where that comes instead of Tornadus. Maybe if the opposing team has a lot of fake out. Voltorb, I don't really see coming much. Dugtrio, maybe you want to trap some things sometimes, so it could come. But overall, I like a lot of this team. I like a lot of the speed control with it. The speed tiers are decent, but I think one thing it's going to struggle with is in team building just a little bit. I think you're going to have to decide if you want to go slow or go fast in a given week. And because a lot of your Pokemon that if you normally would want to be able to run a split, like, okay, I want to be able to run Trick Room and Tailwind and be able to pick each game which way I want to go. You got to really decide with Indeedee and Armarouge because they're your middle speed Pokemon that really allow you to go either way on it. So that's why I think it gets a little bit tricky. But otherwise, I think there's just a lot of really good, really solid pieces on this team. It does make me nervous a bit with the defensive matchups, especially into fairy types. Doesn't look like it's the best outside of that Armarouge. But I do think that this team is probably very good. Oh, you just never want to face like a Blizzard or an Ice Beam. There's just so many ice weaknesses on this team. Armarouge is really a defensive pivot for it. But what do you think, Winston?
Yeah, I agree. I think that like obviously Indeedee Armarouge Gallade is a really cool kind of combo in terms of just clicking psychic moves and killing everything. Obviously, dark types exist, so you have to be careful, which is nice because Gallade hits them, Low Kicks hits them really hard, Enamorus hits them really hard. So you do have good dark type counters, which obviously is always good to have on a psychic on a Psy spam type of comp. I think Mabostiff is actually probably going to put a lot of work in here. I think that the team in general is a little frail, especially on the physical side, like Indeedee, Gallade. Obviously, Dugtrio and Low Kicks are frail, and Voltorb is there too, But um, I think in general, like having that Intimidate pressure to help Indeedee get Trick Room up, or help Gallade live hits to keep one-shotting things with Psychic Terrain boosted Psycho Cuts. I think that's going to do a lot of work. As well as I agree with you that I think the Trick Room mode here is phenomenal. I'm really interested to see if Dina can, how much she brings Greedent, because I think Greedent has a lot of really cool sets, but I also realize that it's kind of not that good too. So I'm curious to see how much that'll come. But yeah, I mean, I think your thoughts pretty much summed up what I was thinking on this one. You good to move on?
Yeah, and as we're moving into the top five, I'll just note when I was tiering for this tier list or power ranking. Sorry, ranking is the word I was looking for. Tiering is just stuck in my head. I think that the top five, I'd say, could have been ranked in any order and are just a little bit set above from the rest of the teams in my estimation. But Dina's does come the closest to it.
I agree with that. I think our top five was exactly the same, and our sixth and seventh were both Dina and Tay. So definitely agreed in general on the general consensus. We just had different orders for the top five. But I'll let you take this one here. No, I
No,
will
it's
take
your
this
turn,
one.
Wakeman.
Right,
There
right,
we go.
right.
Baby
I,
steps.
I read I read four, and I was like, oh, it's an even number. So this is Hunter's team, or actually, I meant to say Archery VGC. So this is a very top-heavy team, but in my opinion, it executes that top heaviness a bit better than something like the Tay Breezy's team with the six NFEs on it. Like, there's three here, but Spupa provides redirection. Bronzor is actually a pretty consistent Trick Room setter. You do have Hypno, so there's a little bit of redundancy there, but Bronzor is a legit Trick Room setter and a ground switch in, which this team doesn't really need more of because you already have Torn and Earthworm, but immunities are nice regardless. And obviously then Fracture is, 117 attack, breaking swipe shenanigans. It does some stuff. I can't imagine it's going to come that much, but where you really obviously want to, look though is like Torn, Chiyu, Zoroark, Iron Hands, right? Like those four, holy crap. Like that is so much damage output. You have, Zoroark Chiyu is great. I think that disguising, obviously you can't disguise as Chiyu because they'll know because the Beads of Ruin won't activate, but in general, like being able to disguise your, I mean, there's not like a super prominent, like you'd think like, oh, I want to put my fighting weakness behind a disguise or something like that. But so there's not really a whole lot of that like obvious type synergy with Zoroark. But I just think being able to click moves with Zoroark and Chiyu out is really cool. Plus, you don't always know what's hitting you when they lead Chiyu plus Torn, and that Torn is actually Zoroark, and you go to fake out Torn and you do nothing and take a Heat Wave plus Shadow Ball and everything dies. So I think that kind of flowcharting I think could work really well for this team. You obviously have your little mini Trick Room mode with like Donphan and Earthworm clicking Earthquake. The Trick Room mode is also, obviously pretty kind of resting on Iron Hands' shoulders too, I think, but Iron Hands obviously just never dies and works kind of regardless of what the speed control is. Like, you're probably not one-shotting this thing ever. So, like, I think Tailwind Iron Hands could actually be a real threat. I think Trick Room Iron Hands is obviously very good. So I think Iron Hands is fantastic here. I definitely like you're going to want to be careful about lowering your own Iron Hands' SPDEF because that's kind of where people are going to be wanting to target that anyway. But other than that, I mean, this team is just super strong. Like the damage output is insane. Even just like Chiyu Torn clicking Tailwind Heatwave and then clicking Bleak Wind Storm, like that's really strong. Um,
Mhm.
so what are your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this team's going to run Tailwind Iron Hands much more often than Trick Room.
Hmm.
I love the Dawn Fan Earthworm stuff that you can get going with it. I don't think this version of Samurott actually fits the team super well. But one thing with Zoroark H that I think is really good is you can disguise it as a Tornadus because people will try to fake out the Tornadus and taunt the Tornadus a
Yep.
lot and then just absolutely eat whatever attack that thing wants to throw at it. So I think that's going to happen a lot with it. Like I said, these top five teams are all very, very strong. If I had to pick a weakness here, it's probably the slower end. Again, I don't really know what the Hypno is going to be doing. The Bronzor is a decent Trick Room setter, but to get Trick Room up with Bronzor, you need to have the redirection, which means a Bronzor Spupa lead, which I don't know if that's something that I'd ever be scared of, no matter what's in the back.
Yeah,
So
I think Iron Hands Bronzor could probably get Trick Room up semi reliably, but
yeah, as long as there's not ghost types or covert cloak
right,
correctly
yeah.
typed. So that's sort of what makes me a bit nervous about this team is the trick room mode. But I think the fast mode on this team is just so good and going to be so consistent. Like obviously, this team's going to be threatening every single week.
Yep. Very strong. You got anything else for this one or should we move on?
Now let's go ahead and move on.
All right, this is our other fourth place tie and it's Sebzi's team. Go ahead, Dan.
Sebzi, okay. So there was a part of me that was debating putting this team number one. There's just so much power on this team. Like Regieleki, Inteleon, Toxicroak, Urshifu, Rillaboom, Gardevoir, Copperajah, like Camerupt. Everything on this team just hits like an absolute truck.
Don't forget
The
Halter.
average, yeah, the average attacking stats on this team are both above 90, which means there are going to be some absolute standouts. Like Urshifu plus Rillaboom, there's your physical core. That's just going to be an absolute menace. And then you've got Gardevoir plus Inteleon or Haunter or Regieleki, and there's a special core. So this team's mixed offenses are really good. Defensively, it's not going to be quite as strong, and the speed control is a little suspect outside of the Aleki and Teleon stuff with the Icy Wind and the Electro Web. But if someone's going to be running like a Clear Amulet or a Ground type, then the speed control gets a little suspect fast on this team. And the Gardevoir is not the best Trick Room setter in the world. It's more of a good offensive piece if it has the speed control already, not necessarily the speed control option itself. Not that it can't set Trick Room, but it just dies to so many things before Trick Room goes up. So that's what makes me a little nervous about this team. But otherwise, just like in terms of pure offense, this team just hits so hard. But if another team can neutralize its speed control and start going faster than it, defensively, it's just a little suspect. It's probably the frailest team in the league, along with being the hardest hitting team in the league, which is a really weird combination to have. But I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, this is these are the kind of teams I like to draft. I think in general, like obviously, you know, like you said, it's super apparent that this team is just gonna just crush people. Like if you, I think if Sebzi is able to consistently like get leads right, which I think is not that hard to do with this team. Rillaboom, Gardevoir are both great on lead, as is Toxicroak, as is Urshifu. Like Regieleki, almost everything here is just a super good lead option, other than maybe like Copperajah and Camerupt. Um, but like, yeah, so I think it's definitely going to be volatile, and I think this could definitely be a team where we see it wins really hard and loses really hard, and there might be a little bit less like there might be fewer super close sets against this team. Obviously, you know, when you bring in player skill, it's like you can make you make anything work, right? But I think that in general, I think these kind of teams can work very well in this format. Like this looks
Mhm.
like a team that can really use like a good offensive Terra to just swing momentum really quickly. I don't know. I guess my main thing is like not sure about Cacturn. Um, it's a good tier 5 like in terms of just value. So there's that. But like you already have Sucker Punch, you already have Rillaboom. Not super sure about that, but again, it's a tier 5. It's one of the better value tier 5s. I get it. Capsakid is funny. Does it get Rage Powder?
I think so. Let's assume it does.
We're gonna find out right now because I
Yeah.
feel like that is an important. It does. Okay, so it does have a redirector, even if its base stats are 56, 40, 40 bulk, but it's there. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Violet.
true. Yeah. But yeah, in general, like the team is super strong. I'm a big Haunter fan as a low tier. And yeah, I think the value here, especially, I think is great. Like, there's nothing in on this comp where I look at it and I'm like, wow, that could be stronger, or like that could be better value, or something like that. Even like the main pick I questioned, Cacturn, is very good value in the tier. So I think that's a super strong thing, and the base stats here are generally pretty high as well. All right. Well, if that's all you've got, Dan, we'll move on. I
We've
think
got to move on to the next one.
yes, Daniel Brown the third. Are you're not actually the third, right?
No, I am not.
Dang. I just thought it sounded funny because you wrote Daniel, and I was like, it'd be funny if he was actually the third. Anyway, so this is a super Dan team, in my opinion. I think that the value picks here are all very, very good, similar to the last team. Like, there's not really any picks here where I'm like, that's a little questionable in the tier. Like, maybe Fletchling because you have other Tailwind setters, but even then, like, just the option of priority Tailwind is fine enough for tier 5 in my opinion. Um, I think that the Trick Room mode here is pretty nice. I mean, it's Slowking Galar. You can, you can have like your chili reception stuff for Avalugg. I don't understand why they made Avalugg Hisui base 38. Um, it makes me upset, but that being said, I think that just in general, the damage output here between Lando and Basculegion, those are kind of, and Gyarados and Heatran, those are kind of your big four in terms of offensive output. But Avalugg is strong, Chestnut is strong enough, Well, yeah, base 100 attack, it's fine. Rotom with Chili Reception Hail mode is one of my favorite modes in general. I love it. I think that as I do very frequently, it seems, with your teams, Dan, I think I'm not a huge fan of the speed tiers, and I think that the Tailwind setters being Fletchling, Masquerain, and Gyarados it's not the best to support those speed tiers, especially given that your slow mode is, it's Slowking and Avalugg, which, as we know, dies to Specs Vacuum Wave from Riolu. And then your next fastest things or your next slowest thing that's like threatening damage is Chestnut, which is 64. So I think that's kind of the main weakness, maybe. I don't think it's going to be super hard to outspeed or underspeed this comp. But in general, like the value picks and the general damage output and type like defensive synergy is really great. Do you have anything you want to say about your team, Dan?
Oh yeah, the speed tiers are actively bad on this team. I've also upgraded myself to the seventh, but
Oh, nice.
the speed tiers are bad. But the spread damage on this team, like you got your Heatran, Lava Plume threat. You've got probably the best Disquake mode in the league with Landorus and Rotom, and that Disquake mode can also be Blizzard spam. Basculegion can just hit so hard. And I do have some decent Tailwind setters, but I think more importantly, the Gyapdos is just an awesome Intimidate deterrence for
Mm-hmm.
my Landorus and Basculegion. So I get that these speed tiers are bad on this team. Like I'm not gonna sugarcoat that, and that I'm gonna be going second a lot. But also, the bulk on this team is really, really good. Like average defense is 97 on this team,
Mm-hmm.
and the average attack is 95. Like this team's gonna hit really hard, and if you and even though it's probably a bit physically slanted, like it also just has a Heatran, which Heatran Landorus seems like a really good combination, or Heatran Captive seems like a really good combination, and I just think that there's a lot of cool pieces with this team. And if I can make the speed tiers like at all functional, this team's just gonna run away with a lot of things.
Yeah, I agree for sure. Yeah, I feel like I've had this discussion slash conversation slash thoughts about your teams for like several leagues, and I think you always just do well with them anyway. I mean, obviously, I know we're not taking that into account with the ranking, but yeah, I mean the power level here and defensive synergy and stuff. Basque Legion, I will say publicly after using it for 1 week and calcing with it for 2 weeks in PDCL, I'm watching it closely in all of the leagues I'm seeing it in, as well as using it myself, because I'm very ready and willing to admit or to hold the L on putting it in tier two.
Yeah, we
Um,
know you wanted to draft it, and that's why you put it in tier two. It's
I
just
didn't
like
draft
Cinderace.
it.
Hey, that doesn't mean you didn't want to. It's just like Cinderace. We understand Wakeman, but yes, this Pokemon's insane.
Yeah, I mean, again, it requires support, all that. So we'll see. But I
But
just
does it
want,
really?
I just want everybody to know that it's on my radar.
Does it really
um,
require support?
uh, yeah, it needs like Tailwind
Nah,
generally. I mean, you can just put
nah.
Scarf on it too.
It's big.
Um,
Just eat the hit and hit back harder.
that's true. Okay, well, we're gonna move on. So we had a two-way tie for first place, and I think I am of the opinion personally that these teams are maybe even a slight cut above the other three in top five. Personally, I don't know if Dan. I don't think these were the exact top two Dan had. Um, but we'll move on. And Dan, you want to talk about Raspberry's team?
Yeah, so make sure to follow him on YouTube at Raspberry. All the videos are like 2 years old at this point, but it's still a good follow.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
but looking at his team, okay, it's obvious what it wants to do. It wants to set Tailwind with Talonflame and either use Goldango or Regidrago or Sneasler. Like, it's gonna, it's gonna have some of the most consistent speed control plus offense in the league. And then the Trick Room mode is decently solid. Like the setter is substandard, but Arboliva Clawitzer can operate in Trick Room pretty effectively. Clodsire can shut down a lot of weird things that opponents can do. And then Luxray is a good flex piece that can go on other things. Same with Basculin. So, I mean, it's a good team overall. Again, this team makes me a little worried about its fragility, which is weird to say with its overall HP stats, but that gets really shifted by the Regidrago and the Wigglytuff. But I do think that the fast mode on this team is really fragile, and if this team has someone that's matching Tailwind against it or setting Trick Room against it, it's really going to struggle. And then the Trick Room mode, you know, it's a good Trick Room mode. It's not like world beating or anything, but it can definitely win games. So I think the fast mode is really good, but really fragile, and the Trick Room mode is, probably above average, but it's not going to be like the I just set Trick Room and auto win like an Iron Hands or an Ursaluna team can be. So I think there's a lot of really good things with this team, and I think the speed control, especially the fast one, is good, but you know, just the bulk makes me a bit nervous overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is kind of in a similar vein to Sebzi's team in terms of it's gonna go fast, it's gonna hit very hard. There's definitely more of a Trick Room presence here, which I like. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like Slowpoke's Eviolite bulk, 90, 65, 40 is pretty good. You're gonna, and it has Oblivious, so you're gonna be able to get because I think that's one of the main things with Eviolite Trick Room setters is like, oh, you just taunt it for free. But Slowpoke Galar can't be taunted, so that's super awesome. Like you said, it's definitely not optimal, right? Not ideal, but um, I think that yeah, generally like having Golden Go to support the Regidrago, right? Like, because obviously you always want to have a good fairy answer. You also have Sneasler, which can Dire Claw, is it called? Yeah, Dire Claw everything. Um, and just like I I think that just in general, like you have Clawitzer, which can work under Tailwind and Trick Room pretty effectively. Same with like, and then Basculin can just be a nuke when it wants to. Basculin calcs are crazy. So yeah, I mean, again, I don't have much to say that you didn't already say. I think this team is phenomenal. You have the second fastest fake out in the game. Yeah, because it's only Weavile that's faster, I believe, than Sneasler. Don't I don't know if I see too much Unburden. Actually, I do, but I'm not going to say anything about it. Um, but yeah, other than that, I mean, again, super strong
You're not
team.
gonna say which Pokemon has Unburden, even though you just said the
No, no,
ability out
no, no,
loud,
no. I
and people
meant,
can read.
I meant, I meant Unburden setups, like ways
Oh,
to proc Unburden on Sneasler
yes,
yourself.
yes. Okay.
Um, but yeah, and then obviously Luxray with Guts under Tailwind can nuke shit too. Yeah, super solid team. Gonna be very hard to prep for, I think. Is that all you have for that one, Dan?
Yeah, I mean it's a really good team, and I'm excited to see what Raz does with it this season.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving on to our last team, the other tied for number one. We have Tobias's team. This team is, I think, also obviously right. We ended up collectively ranking it at number one. This team is insane, right? Like the Trick Room mode here, I think is better than Raz's, right? Because your Trick Room setter's better. Um, Ursaluna, that probably more threatening under Trick Room than Arboliva. Although Ursaluna is kind of your only like super threatening Trick Room on here, but it's enough with how strong
It's
Ursaluna
all
is.
you need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, Ursaluna being base 50 speed means that you can run it under Tailwind. Like Kilowatt Drill Ursaluna is a legit Disquake mode. Obviously, it's not as fast as like Great Tusk or Garchomp or Iron Treads or the other ground types like that. But I mean, fast like Turbo Whack was a set last gen that tons of people ran, right? And Ursaluna is faster than Marowak, so I mean, there you go, right? That totally works. I
It,
think,
it's the same speed as Iron Hands,
right? Yeah, yeah,
and that's a set. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, just in general, like, and then you have, I think you have really good ways to protect your Ursaluna. I wouldn't call this like a protect the king team, but you just have great ways of protecting Ursaluna. Like Go-Goat is a fantastic switch in for Ursaluna. You absorb grass moves and get an attack boost, so people always have to kind of think about clicking grass moves if Go-Goat is in team preview. Um, and then Stonejourner clicking Wide Guard and having Power Spot next to Ursaluna clicking Earthquake. Holy crap, like that's just going to kill everything. Um, and that's not even mentioning, I have only talked about Ursaluna, and then there's literally a Spectrier there. Like, Ursaluna and Spectrier are almost like mirror images of each other, right? Bulky, slow, physical versus super fast, frail. Kind of frail. Spectrier is really not that frail, but
No,
um,
it's not.
fast, not as bulky as Ursaluna, special attacker. And I just think, like, you have a ton of potential um, to snowball with Spectre on this team. You have good Intimidate with Arcanine Hisui. I'm really interested to see how Arcanine does on this team. I think it could be really, really good, obviously, to protect Spectre and stuff, because generally speaking, people are going to be wanting to hit it on the physical side. But Umbreon just being able to, like, switch in on Spectre really well and um, just kind of be annoying while Ursaluna gets its burn off, or while Spectre you know, grabs a kill with some chip from something, and you get a boost. And I just think that there's a lot of cool flowcharting this team can do, and I think just having insanely consistent speed control plus like lots of ways to boost your own damage output with this team is just going to be insane. What do you think, Dan?
I think this team's going to go as fast as Kilowattrel and Slowking can take it. They are both very good, consistent speed control options. And if this team is going first, it's going to win. If it's going second, it's still going to win sometimes, but not all the time. So I think that this team's going to come down a lot to prep, flow charting, and putting the big offensive threats with the Ursaluna, Arcanine, and Spectrier in good position. Because if they're consistently in good position, they're going to win a lot. If they are caught out of position, they're pretty easy to hit, except for the Ursaluna to some extent. But the Arcanine and Spectrier, you can pretty easily neutralize. So it's all going to come down a lot of this team to prep and positioning. So I think this is an awesome team overall. The Zora and Dedenne could probably have been more valuable tier 5s, but that's sort of nitpicking a little bit. I'm not too sure what the Fortress is going to be doing on this team. But otherwise, a lot of things that work well together, and it's a very flowchart heavy team that's going to have to consistently put its options into good position, but it does have the tools to do so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Being able to like set Trick Room with Slowking and Chilly Reception out. I mean, you don't have like like obviously a Blizzard user here that I can. Yeah, I don't think you have a Blizzard user here, but I mean, just being able to pivot out into something is super valuable. Yeah, it's a great team. I think it's going to do really well. And Dan, if you don't have anything more to add, I think that concludes our Gyarados Division PRs. Thank you so much to everyone for watching. Thanks to everyone who's participating. I think this is going to be a super fun season. And Dan, thanks for helping out with this. And you have anything else you want to say?
Nope. Just looking forward to the season and seeing how everything shakes out.
All right. Well, again, thanks for watching, everybody, and we will see you later.